It's the morning after the Oscars.
It is the morning after the Oscars. Once again, we came away empty-handed.
Yes.
But listen, it's always next year.
But we won in many ways because if you live in this country, you don't actually have to watch the ceremony as live. You can just watch it in the morning. You get all the clips, all the red carpet, and you think, oh, yeah, no, I've covered this one off. You don't have to sit through all the tedium, and there is a huge amount in it.
The way all British people experience the Oscars is just watching Ross King on Good Morning Britain.
And there's no shame in that.
He's great.
It was actually shorter than expected, though, the Oscar ceremony, because Al Pacino cocked up the announcement of Best Picture, which went to Oppenheimer. And he opened the envelope and instead of reading out all the 10 nominees for Best Pictures, just cut straight to this chase by saying, "My eyes see Oppenheimer."
And my eyes see Oppenheimer. Yes, Emma Thomas, Charles Grodin.
My eyes see Oppenheimer.
Which is not...
It sounds like when they say, do you know what the shortest verse in the Bible is? It is, my eyes see Oppenheimer.
The broadcast came in under schedule, which wasn't expected.
But also, Al Pacino's been to an awful lot of award ceremonies. You must understand the sort of grammar of an award ceremony. They don't just open it and go, my eyes see Oppenheimer. Because everyone in the audience just went, oh, sorry. Sorry.
Can I just say he's a new dad, Richard? At age 82 or 83 or whatever he is. He's just had a baby.
Congratulations,
Al. 4 years younger than him. And so, it's possible that those late nights doing the nappies diapers, as they say in America, are taking away some of his focus.
Or perhaps he's AI Pacino. That would work written down. Yeah. Written down, that's actually not a bad joke.
That is.
Now I say it out loud.
Yeah,
it needs
very
work. Poor indeed. But it was good in a way that he did make that slight gaffe because there were no gaffes. Really, which makes the ceremony less fun.
We knew all the way in that this was going, right from the start of award ceremonies, which was months ago, that this was sort of going to be a coronation for Christopher Nolan and for Oppenheimer.
Christopher Nolan, Oppenheimer.
And whether or not you think it's Christopher Nolan's best film, there is much more to the Academy these days where they feel that, oh dear, there's someone who's really, really big, who people sort of credit with getting people back to the cinemas after the pandemic, and who hasn't got an Oscar. Now, in the old days, they were very relaxed about not giving people Oscars. Howard Hawks never got an Oscar. Alfred Hitchcock never got an Oscar. Garbo never got a Dietrich, Fred Astaire, all these sort of great big...
Tom Cruise.
Yeah. No, he has had an Oscar, hasn't he?
Tom Cruise?
Did he not get it for Born on the 4th of July?
Oh, yeah, you could
Sorry,
be right. You know what? I'm thinking of Jason Statham.
Yeah, yes, you think of Statham. Just be nice to be nominated for Statham. But anyhow, you need that. You kind of need something, some sort of mess up, some viral moment. And they didn't have a lot of those, I must say. The red carpet, to me, it's almost like it's a sort of Leni Riefenstahl event now. It is so organised. There's two great big nights of the year for fashion. This and the Oscars and the Met Gala.
I thought you were going to say the TV Quick Awards.
Not the TV Quick Awards, but I'm sure that they do count. But even for something like the Golden Globes, those agencies that run kind of metrics and impact and whatever say that just the red carpet of that is worth kind of about $90 million to the fashion brands. And so if you're a really big fashion brand and your stuff is out there, like Louis Vuitton, Emma Stone and Da'Vine Joy Randolph, who won Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress, were both in Louis Vuitton. So this is a big deal.
So Louis Vuitton's the real winner.
Louis Vuitton is the real winner. But it's it's all the brands say we don't pay people to wear the dresses. And all the brands do. And they might try and say, oh, they were doing some promotional work or whatever. But you can get paid for, we're talking about like non-Oscars ceremonies, you can get paid tens of thousands. You might get paid up to $250,000 to wear a dress. And in some very rare cases, I saw a great fashion expert, Lauren Sherman, discussing this week, you can get $1 million for one night wearing a dress.
Wow.
And
what,
they
me?
will all deny.
Hold on. Give me details about how I can get $1 million
because you will
for
do
one
it.
night wearing a dress.
I think we all would. But anyway.
My God, I do it. But it's the other interesting thing, because for years the thing on Twitter was stop asking actresses what designer they're wearing. You think, oh no, that's part of their contract.
Believe me, they want you to ask, because if they don't get asked, they're going to go along. And the red carpet as well, which I noticed this year, the way they shot the red carpet and the way they did the sort of wide shots, they didn't do like a big wide shot. So you'd see, a lot of people think with red carpets, oh, there's just a small red carpet outside the thing and everyone walks past and gets photographed in front of the statue or whatever. It is enormous, this thing. It goes on for absolutely miles, and it is a place of absolute military efficiency, and they are shouted at and they've got to look in the right direction. And then, you're in this awful situation where you're a photographer and you think, yeah, I don't want your husband in it, actually. So they have to shout out, can we have one just for fashion? And that is the trade euphemism for get your husband out of the picture because nobody cares about him.
One for fashion. If you ever go to like premieres and things like that, which I very rarely do, but sometimes something will crop up, and there'll be, as you say, there'll be like a red carpet, and say you turn up at the red carpet, but the red carpet has like about 4 different lanes on it.
Yeah.
And like you go, hold on, I'm in lane 4, and there's no photographers in lane 4, so they have a red carpet, but it's really very carefully segregated. You think, I don't appear to be walking down the same path as Hugh Grant. Is that
what has happened here?
Which one of us is in the A-list here?
But they want to put you, and they also want, the big stars want to turn up at the very end because they don't want to have to, turn up at sort of 3 p.m. and go really, really slowly down it and then have to sit in their seat for even longer than they would wish to. One of the big stories on the red carpet this year, and there have been some quite funny things written about this, is Ozempic.
Yes, Ozempic is the real winner. It was even advertised during the Oscars, I think.
That's really interesting.
Which is quite on the nose.
They actually advertised in the week beforehand saying, it's some rather sort of finger-wagging adverts saying it's really bad that people are using this to get into a dress, which seemed really like, okay, I guess you're talking about Hollywood a few days out from the Oscars. So they've attempted to have their cake and eat it, have they, by having an advert there?
Or not have their cake because
apparently
they have lost their appetite.
The food at these parties is now just completely left. You would have thought that would have always been the case, but apparently wasn't. Having starved themselves to get into these dresses for weeks and months in many cases, the food at the parties afterwards was always very well consumed. I remember Graydon Carter said, when I did the Vanity Fair party, he said, I always had the starters on the plates. You arrive and you get there and you sit down and your starters already on your plate because people are really hungry.
There's a great article about Ozempic last week, and it was talking about the effect it's had on Hollywood. Because a lot of them are on it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's name names, but a lot of them are taking...
Just assume everyone's on it, by the way.
Yeah,
it's much easier to assume everyone's on it.
But it's saying the restaurant business in Hollywood is genuinely struggling.
Yeah, nobody's eating dinner.
People are not hungry anymore. It was talking about like makeup artists, but saying there's people's faces are really changing shape. The job we're having to do is slightly different. The people who loved it were the fashion designers who
believe that you can never be too. I'm not suggesting that I think you can never be too thin, but the fashion designers think this is great. Everyone fits into our sample sizes, and this is a lot easier for us.
And the personal trainers were saying we have to literally the first 15 minutes of most sessions is somebody upstairs throwing up. Before they're able to come down.
She's having ginger tea for 10 minutes was one of them, and then she'll be down.
But it's like an epidemic over there, right?
Yeah. Well, I think people were really... I think the first big one was when, for the Met Gala, when Kim Kardashian wore that dress that Marilyn Monroe had sang Happy Birthday to JFK in. She had lost a massive amount of weight, even though she doesn't have a whole lot at all to lose, to get into this thing. And she did some extraordinary series of interviews about, I had to be so disciplined eating my steamed fish and vegetables. My feelings about the steamed fish and vegetable idea, it passes for conversation from a celebrity. But she gave so many of these interviews. It's like, you can't in 3 weeks lose what you did. So that was the first, I think she was the real kind of canary in the coal mine for it. And people thinking, oh my God, what is this thing?
Jockeys used to give themselves tapeworms.
Yeah.
That's what
Mariah Callas did that. I think she swallowed about 5 in her life.
No, did she? Mm-hmm. Wow. So listen, Ozempic is very much the new tapeworm.
Yes, like everything's always one up from leeches, isn't it?
But Oppenheimer is the big winner. Which, do you know what? The one thing I will say, no gaffes or anything like that. It felt like a proper old-fashioned big movie night. And the movie industry's been through some terrible times. It's got more terrible times to come, I'm sure. But it felt like you got Oppenheimer, you got Barbie, you got some great supporting films. You've got like American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall, like proper movies out there.
But it's unusual, I think, that people had seen Barbie and they'd seen Oppenheimer. And I have to say, in the last few years, you're looking at the Best Picture list and nobody's gone to the multiplex to see these things. I'm not saying they haven't kind of made money, but they're on smaller budgets and they're not the mainstream of what people go and see. But they've had a very great thing for themselves this year with the Academy because so many people had seen, and they became sort of billion-dollar movies, Barbie and Oppenheimer. And so I think this is a blip.
Oh, do you think so? We'll look back on this and like next year we'll be back to Kung Fu Panda 4 will be...
Well, none of those films get nominated. So you've got this 2-track thing where you've got the awards films, which people like for prestige and more, like we were talking about things like Saudi money. You'll see that kind of money backing those kind of prestige features, which are kind of get you cultural purchase and people talk about, but people don't throng to see, essentially. And then you have movies which are popular, which might be superhero franchise or things based on video games or whatever it is, but they never get nominated. And I think that they've been really lucky with that this year, where people have seen, so many people have seen two of the mega, and they happened the same weekend. There with the Oppenheimer phenomenon. People have seen those films, and that counts for something, because it makes people feel like this isn't some kind of weird self-indulgent thing that, I mean, it's kind of weird self-indulgent thing, like all award ceremonies, but it's not something that is so
By the way,
removed.
congratulations on your podcast of the year nomination. Talking of award ceremonies.
We are nominated.
Yeah,
for
broadcasting
podcast
press.
of
So
the
that's.
year.
I know that you won't be going because you don't approve of that sort of thing, but we are going to have a great old time. Anyway, that aside, now you say it's a blip, but I wonder. I mean, the one thing you know about Hollywood is the one thing that attracts money is what worked last. What was the last thing to work? Let's do that again. And you would hope maybe the success of Oppenheimer means that there are projects that wouldn't have got greenlit, say 2 years ago, which now will get greenlit. So maybe don't do that.
I
face.
don't know. I mean, actually, Cord Jefferson, who won Best Adapted Screenplay for American Fiction, which is absolutely terrific, he said something quite good in his speech, which was quite sort of political within the town, as it were. He said, a lot of people passed on this movie, so many people passed on this movie, and I'm really glad it got made. But, you know, just don't forget that a $200 million tentpole is also a risk.
And instead of making one $200 million movie, try making 20 $10 million movies.
And it got a huge round of applause, because I guess people, in lots of ways, people wish that they, you know, they certainly might find it more interesting as a project, as an actor, to be involved in those type of films than basically doing a great big green screen superhero performance, which has kind of eaten the market. If that could happen, that might be exciting. And yet it takes a long time for the supertanker to turn around. And they've basically bet the farm on these kind of slates where everything is propped up by superhero or video game franchise, or maybe now after Barbie toy franchises.
Or people who make nuclear reactors.
Well, maybe. But Christopher Nolan is a sort of category of one, isn't he? And those are very expensive films, and people believe that there's something about him that can make kind of high art, that whether or not you think it's high art, but it can make something that they regard as high art, and it can, you know, bring people back to cinemas after the pandemic. Tenet was really, people held up as a sort of example, like, gosh, I can't believe, you know, he'll only ever do theatrical release. He's like Tom Cruise. If it doesn't have a theatrical release, he's not interested. He's not a television star.
Never won an Oscar, of course.
He will...
I think that's right.
He's a sort of old cinema. They have to believe in him because he
so
represents a world that's now gone.
There's no superhero in his film because he's the superhero.
Yes.
I thought it was hosted by either Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon. I can never remember which. But I thought it did a great job. Like,
Yes.
nice gags, like proper, again, just an absolute safe pair of hands, which is what you need. You think, oh, this is like proper old school, you know, Oscars from years ago. It gave me a sense of optimism. Anyway, the success of Oppenheimer, the fact that there's movies like American Fiction and Poor Things and Anatomy of a Fall, unusual movies being out there, the fact that you've got this sort of ceremony that seems to work and everyone, you know, all the stars were there and there's big new stars, you know, Cillian Murphy and Emma Stone winning and Margot Robbie, you know, there as a producer and lots of female producers, you know, winning big. I just think it gave me some optimism for that industry. And also, after 37 attempts, Godzilla finally won an Oscar. That's the big news. That for like visual effects. So Godzilla finally got one as well.
I saw the trailer for Godzilla versus Kong or whatever it's called, and there was a sort of shocked silence in the cinema for that one. I have to say I've seen the trailer twice for now, both in full cinemas for the Fall Guy, which has got Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling, who seems to be doing the same character all over again, and that has met with stony silence.
God, I hate that thumbs up stuff kind of stuff.
Box office receipts are going to be really down this year, and I have to temper that note of optimism that you have.
That's not like you.
No, I'm a big fan of what Cord Jefferson said, and I would love to see the same money being used to make a series
More
of different films. And how many of the big tentpoles have essentially been flops for however many hundreds of millions of dollars?
And also maybe make them shorter would be another note. I was thinking, as Oppenheimer, listen, it's nice that there's a big movie that you can have an opinion on. My opinion is, imagine the film it was if you lost that last hour. Sorry, Robert Downey Jr. I just think, like in Eurovision Song Contest, you can't go over 3 minutes. And I would say 2 hours 15 if your film is longer than 2 hours 15 minutes, you stop it there. Stop
I
it at
think
2
it
hours
should
15
be an
minutes.
hour 45, and you've got to really argue that you're making an epic if it goes to 2:15.
I would love one. I was trying to,
Yeah.
be kind of liberal about it. I would, 1:30. If it's 3 hours, then if it's 3 hours, then that's a mini series.
But actually giving audiences in that sense what they want. They might want to see a movie that they can go out to dinner afterwards. Theatres are trying to do it more. We can see what's happening with theatres. Theatres are trialling, they're saying that on some nights we'll start at 6:30 because working patterns have changed since the pandemic. And if you're going to the theatre that night, you could probably be there by 6:30. Lots of ones are doing no interval and shorter. People are trying to do what will bring in the audiences. And I do think that so many people of all different age groups, by the way, it's not just like an old person saying, policemen are getting younger, would like to see shorter movies.
Although policemen are getting younger. No, but it's true. No one ever really comes out of the cinema going, oh, I wish that had been half an hour longer. And
Yes.
almost every 3-hour film, you can go, I can tell you straight away which half hour I would cut out of that film. And it's the half hour that would be put straight back in the director's cut. You just think, entertain us, for goodness sake. EastEnders is not an hour and a half long, Anyway.
Lots of those Best Picture nominees were around the 1:45, the sub 2 hour mark, which is interesting. And
if you had a category, genuinely, here's a category next year for the Oscars, best film under an hour and 45 minutes. Imagine there'd be so many films in the edit going, if we just knock another 17 minutes off this, we could be eligible for the
nailed
Oscar.
on.
Yeah. So somewhere in between best short feature and best film. I thought best picture was the Kate Middleton one. That's what I thought.
Manipulated image. We might have to. We'll see how that plays out, and
Yes,
may discuss this in full next week.
Yes, exactly. I think at the moment it's too early to tell.
Too early to say.
If it's
Yeah, too early to say whether it be incredibly poor taste. So we'll just wait and see till next week, at which point we'll know more.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the Oscars: Ozempic and films that are too long.